Welcome back. You're watching a non-stop coverage of this huge management rejig at Infosys, which is, of course, India's second biggest technology company. First up, we've got KV Kamath, who's been appointed as a chairman of the board of Infosys. Narayan Murthy stepping down as a chairman of the company. He will, of course, be chairman emeritus in that company. Chris Gopalakrishnan has been made the executive co-chairman of the company. It's a bit of a surprise. People were probably expecting him to be the vice chairman, but the board decided to make him the executive co-chairman. And SD Shibulal, another co-founder of the company, has been promoted as the MD and CEO. No COO in the company, at least for now. That third coming in from Infosys. We've got Mr. Shovan Mukherjee, ED Consulting Services at PwC India, has been with us for a while now. Shovan, appreciate the fact that you're with us. A quick word before we let you go. The fact that Chris has been made the executive co-chair, in a sense, do you think that will probably be more acceptable, at least to the client community and even to the employees as well? There's a certain amount of continuity. It's not like Murthy is out, obviously Nandan stepped out a year and a half back, Mohan is no longer there in the company, Dinesh is out. So in a sense, this ensures that there's a certain amount of continuity in top management?
Possibly, because the speculation was, like you said, vice chairman. So it came out as co-chair, executive co-chair. And the fact that this role about being an elderly brother to the Infosians were mentioned a couple of times leads one to believe that this role is meant to sort of give some balance and give some continuity and stability ongoing. So yes, I agree to that.
Thanks very much, Shovan Mukherjee, for joining us from PwC India throughout this coverage. Also now with me on the phone line is Bundeep Rangar Singh, joining us as the chairman of IndusView from London. Hi Bundeep, and good afternoon to you. Talk to us a little bit about how you read into the changes that have been announced at Infosys, and from the community internationally that looks at Infosys as a stock, what do you expect it to react like?
Hi, good afternoon. Well, I guess in some ways the market's not going to be completely surprised, because this has been in play for now a year. The potential candidates have been touted. I guess the real debate was whether it would be Kamath or Chris, and we've seen now it's kind of both. Although clearly Kamath is the chairman, the non-exec chairman, and Chris is the executive chairman. So it's not purely a kind of coalition, and that, I guess, is where the future lies. Is this a cohabitation of two visions, or is this one vision that's going to be driven by Kamath and executed by Chris and, of course, Subodh beneath him?
Right. Bundeep, a quick word from you also on the fact that obviously there's a lot of attention which, in a sense, Kamath and Narayan Murthy will obviously hijack today. But Shibulal, as the Chief Executive Officer, how do you see him shape up as a CEO? These are tough times for Infosys, aren't they?
Well, they are tough times, and you've seen also the earnings that came out a couple of months ago. Infosys and Wipro were probably two companies that depressed the overall IT earnings story. It's not like they're necessarily doing poorly. It's just that their rivals, be it TCS or Cognizant or HCL, are just doing better. And part of what this industry needs and what Infosys will need be a very well-defined vision. And it just can't play to quarterly earnings anymore. It has to redefine its strategy. It has to streamline its operations, differentiate from the competition, and lay down a path for the next at least 5 years, if not longer. And that's really where I believe Kamath has a strong role to play, because you saw his track record in ICICI was stellar. And having had the privilege of meeting him and Narayan Murthy, right, I think there's been a certain chemistry that's worked between them to say, look, the company needs new blood. And that's where Kamath lays down a future, like he did with ICICI, streamlining operations, getting a banking license, taking it international, right, and using IT as an enabler. Now, your question about Subodh, I think, is part of the preservation of a founder's DNA, with him and, of course, Chris being two of the original founding members, while new blood is brought in, and that's the dynamic I think that could work out very successfully, because you get new blood at the top, injecting new vision.
But Bundeep, are you comforted by the fact that he is a founder? And therefore, because there's been this debate about founder versus professional, so you are comforted by the fact that he is a founder and he's the CEO?
I am comforted by that, but I think some of the founding values have to remain intact. But I think that is also part of what maybe had kept the company back. And you saw, Mohandas Pai's resignation in some ways as being a reflection of too much conservatism, not enough aggression, not enough acquisition strategy. And I guess that's where the preservation of founders is valuable, but the injection of new blood was also incredibly important.
Okay, Bundeep, appreciate you joining us. Next up is Mr. Ganesh Natarajan, formerly from NASSCOM. Of course, he's the Vice Chairman and CEO of Zensar Technologies. He joins us from Pune. Thanks, Mr. Natarajan. While I'm sure you have sort of a reaction to this story, but I would like to ask you something more specific, which is about whether KV Kamath coming on board as Chairman of Infosys also sends out a signal of the kind of options many of the other companies in the technology space would have to look at chairmen away from pure technology backgrounds.
No, I think that's a good point you're making. And I think Mr. Kamath, of course, has been one of the most outstanding corporate professionals in India. So it does give the opportunity to move away from family and really look at, professional chairmen. And that's an interesting point. But again, it depends on, looking at Infosys itself, obviously Mr. Kamath will play a certain role. He already mentioned managing the board. And you have Chris, who's really involved. But I think what we must do is shift the spotlight back on Mr. Shibulal, because obviously the company and the industry is in interesting times. And it's what the CEO and his leadership team does that will define the future of the company.
Right. Mr. Natarajan, quickly, last word from you. How easy is it going to be for Infosys to manage this whole transition? We've seen many companies, in a sense, throw it all away during such difficult phases. How easy is it going to be for the company to manage this transition?
See, it's like this. I mean, if you really look at the elements of this transition, clearly their growth is lagging a little as compared to, let's say, the Cognizant and the TCSs of the world. And that's something they need to look at. Chris already mentioned that there is going to be an active need to engage at the CEO or the CXO level in all customers. That's going to be important. The second is there are multiple new trends happening in the industry, whether it's cloud computing and so many other things. So I think transition management is all about setting yourself some, short-term goals. I think Infosys has a wonderful vision. Its values are always spectacular. Murthy himself has been a leader par excellence.
Right.
But what is now required is how do you take those next few baby steps to put it on a different and a faster growth track.
I think that's a really valid point, and I think that's a question we've been raising with everyone. While this is true, this was coming, what's next is really the big challenge. Appreciate you being with us, Mr. Natarajan, live from Pune. Well, this is continuous coverage here on ET Now, much more coming up ahead.